Welcome to Tangential Soup, a weekly podcast discussing life in Australia, technology, food, finance, fitness, and the like, hosted by myself, David Caddy, Melburnian, independent developer and tea enthusiast, as well as my good childhood friend, Alexander Carr, Sydney Sider, karate practitioner, and lover of adventure. Before we get into our main topics for today, I just quickly wanted to mention some interesting terminology that I heard. Well, not interesting, but interesting in its new use, I suppose. So a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about the foldable phones, or the upcoming foldable phones, and I was in the process of editing that episode actually earlier today, even though it's a couple of weeks late. But I did hear myself struggling a bit to explain it to the audience terribly well, either the screen that folded in on itself or the screen that folded out on itself.
Yes.
And I heard someone, I can't remember who exactly it was, I think it was on a podcast, but referred to a valley fold and a mountain fold, which are bits of terminology out of origami. And I think that is actually an incredibly good way and descriptive way of describing it.
It is.
So going forward, I'm going to try to adopt that terminology.
Well, it's relevant terminology, at least for the near term. And if foldable phones take off, then yes, good idea. Is it used in the industry, or was it just used by someone?
No, well, because all this is so new, right, there is no terminology around it. And eventually something's probably going to stick.
Yes.
Or else one design will win out. But if two different designs, continue to go forward for any length of time, there's going to be some terminology around that. And instead of clunkily explaining it every time, something will win. And my vote is for this. I haven't heard anything better yet.
Okay. I suppose infold and outfold don't really describe it very well, do they?
Well, yeah. There's problems with that, whereas at least when you say valley and mountain, you can very clearly picture kind of the idea, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. No, I agree. And good pickup. I think that's a good one.
Did you read this article that is sort of a summary of a paper regarding investing in Lego?
Yes, I did. Now, you were the one who mentioned it to me. I suppose we'll just start with what your thoughts on this particular thing are.
Well, it kind of does make sense to me. So I suppose just quickly summarizing this, a group, I can't remember who it was, but some probably should be more prepared, hey?
It was done by someone in the Russian Higher School of Economics. So I think it was a university paper.
Yeah, so it was a technical paper that came out, and this article that I sent you, which summarizes it, because I didn't want to send you the whole technical article, or technical paper.
Did you read the whole technical paper?
Well, no, but I read the abstract, and that's probably enough for me. Like a lot of those papers can be very dry, and I mean, I assume in economics it's going to be that way. So as a digestible piece, I just took this article from Bloomberg, and it's really just talking about that you can invest in Lego sets, the constructible toy, and they will have very high returns quite often, depending on what the set is, depending on the content and the brick count and the rarity of them. But some, I think there was an example here for one, about a year later, had like a 600% return, which is pretty crazy.
It is.
Even though it was only a small value, it was like $4 to $28 or something.
Yes. Yeah.
But many of them can outperform many other what would be considered very solid investments.
Yes, yeah. And obviously you don't have to pay any fees beyond the actual cost of beyond the initial buying cost of the set. You don't have to, unless you look at storage space, I suppose, where you are paying a premium.
Well, that's the only thing I was going to say. Yeah, you've got to have somewhere to put them all.
Yeah, and I suppose that when you're looking at this, and as you said, the smaller sets, so the smaller piece sets, as in the sets with less pieces, tended to have a larger rate of return, which I think they pointed out at one point does bear somewhat of a similarity to smaller cap stocks, which do tend to perform on average better than larger cap stocks when the market's going up. Not that I think the two are really related in any way, but maybe because they're more accessible, and even if they are, even if the price is increasing, their price is still relatively low. So maybe it just makes them slightly more accessible. I just kind of, it seems like there might be a bit of a gap in this particular set of research, and they're not looking at what exactly has caused this phenomenon. Lego is fairly widely available. There wouldn't be many rare sets, would there?
No. It's just down to the fact that they produce sets that are considered quite good, and then they'll probably produce them for somewhere between 6 months and probably like 3 years, depending on how well they're selling.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually they will be discontinued, and at that point there won't be any more readily available. Obviously, stores will still continue to carry that for a reasonable length of time before they can't really be found very easily, and then they'll only be on eBay and places like that. Then, therefore, they'll carry a higher premium. Well, there's so many collectors out there for Lego, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they'll buy them all straight away. And also, you've got new kids coming through all the time that might want a certain set, or they're a fan of a particular genre, or even these tie-ins sort of with movies and cartoon characters, superheroes, the Lego movie franchise, all that sort of thing. And all this information is clearly very readily available online about all the sets in Lego's history. So it's not that hard for someone to go, oh, I think this genre is cool. What other sets have they produced? And then go, oh, this is this really awesome one. It's not available anymore from Lego directly, but we can still get it, but it carries a big markup. So that's sort of how it happens, I suppose.
That's a good point, actually. The liquidity of the particular investment is definitely questionable. And I mean, not to mention, I guess, the hassle that comes with selling it, because you've got to then organise your own postage and everything like that, and I suppose provide whatever securities you as a seller have to provide based on the insurances you've made about the particular thing. It would, I suppose, if you were to hold, say, $200,000 in Lego, be quite a hassle to store.
Some of them are very bulky, like a lot of pieces.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, I suppose that's another disadvantage to investing in Lego, as it were. Not that I think that there are many people who would actually do something like that.
Well, there's a fair few out there that are dabbling in it.
Oh, really?
And actually, today I just bought $200 worth of Lego myself, which is why I thought of this article and sent it to you.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Was it a collection for your own personal use, or are you going to put it in the cellar and...
No, I'm going to hold on to it for at least 12 months.
And then you're going to try and sell it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is this your own personal experiment in this?
Yeah, it's an experiment.
So the sets you bought, are they all new sets?
They're current sets.
Okay.
So I bought them from Big W. Big W, over the last couple of days, have had this Click Bonanza thing. But anyway, it's just a sale, but it was 25% off. And I had some vouchers as well, so I sort of brought that down. But I bought 6 of the same set, which is this Lego Tron set. Do you know Tron?
I see.
Tron
I know Tron.
Yeah.
Yep. Actually, it was a movie, right, originally?
Yeah.
Or a game?
I know there's a movie back from the 80s. That was the original one. But I don't know. I think it was a movie about a game.
Okay. Well, that would make sense, because...
Maybe. I think it was a movie first.
The new movie that I've seen, that was a movie about a game.
Yeah. So I think the recent remake was just that, a remake. I don't think it had any real new ideas in it.
Right, okay. Well, that would make sense then.
So this Lego set depicts 2 of the light cycles.
Okay, right. Okay.
Like the little
And then
motorcycles. Yeah.
some riders for the motorcycles,
Yes.
presumably.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Well, from what the article has said, there's only been one set that has consistently declined in value, and that's The Simpsons.
Yeah. Interesting, but
It's not very Lego-y when you look at it. It doesn't have like they've changed the shapes of the heads,
mm.
and maybe that matters to people.
And they have noses, don't they?
They do have noses, yeah.
Which Lego never ever had noses.
Yes, yeah.
Which maybe that is why.
Well, look, I mean, for me, I probably wouldn't invest in Lego, but you've got to, I suppose, have an understanding of the market as well.
Do you know Lego Ideas?
I do not know Lego Ideas, no.
So the set I bought and a whole bunch of these other ones that have been mentioned in this article and elsewhere as being good investments are slightly more rare because they come from this Lego Ideas initiative, which is essentially Lego's platform for crowdsourcing ideas. So anyone can go on there, create an account, and you can use either a physical build of your own invention, or like they have software to create a design, a digital design of Lego,
mm-hmm.
and then you can submit it to the community.
Okay.
And if you get 10,000 upvotes within, I don't know, it might be 90 days or 6 months, something like that,
yeah,
then it will trigger a review process by Lego. And if they like the idea, then they'll put it into production.
Wow, okay.
And I think they do reviews every quarter.
Wow, okay.
And they might have like 10 submissions that they go through every quarter, and usually there's about 2 of those that go to production. And if they go to production, what you get as the original designer
mm-hmm.
is 1% of all profits, I think, or maybe revenue of that set for its lifetime.
Wow.
And also 10, retail packages of that set. So I guess you can give them away to friends and family or whatever. Lego typically don't use the design directly from the original designer. Like they'll tweak a lot of the parts just to streamline it or to add more parts or fewer parts depending on what price they're trying to hit and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But it will be modeled fairly closely off the original idea.
Wow, okay.
So this initiative has been going for, I think, 5 or so years.
Yeah.
So every year there's probably between half a dozen and a dozen of these sets from the community that come onto the retail shelves. And a lot of those are considered a bit more unique. So that's where this Tron one comes from.
I see, okay.
Because unlike, say, the Star Wars franchise, there's like a zillion sets of Star Wars. There's only one, at least so far, Tron. And I think there was only one Simpsons one. And there's one Big Bang Theory one, which was a bit weird too. But and one of the most recent ones they've done is a Flintstones one, which, of course, Flintstones is not nearly at its height of popularity right now, but there's a lot of nostalgia for it.
Yeah.
So it can probably very easily support one set. And, in 2 years' time, when this thing is discontinued, people are still going to want Lego Flintstones.
Yes, I understand.
And so I think that's where the demand will come from, that type of thing.
That's fantastic, actually. And I would have never even thought of collecting Lego, to be honest with you. I know that it has a collectible value, but I didn't realize it was such a sophisticated market for it.
To be clear, anyone thinking that they're sitting on a gold mine, these are all brand new in-box sets. The value is not nearly quite the same as already opened and played with Lego.
Yes. And obviously any Lego, at least anything that I got as a child, was opened and then probably subsequently destroyed in some way. I think you were always a lot better with your toys. Do you still have some unopened Matchbox cars or Hot Wheels or something?
Yeah, I've got a few of them. I looked up their value the other day. I've got one that's like worth, I think, $30-40.
Oh, really?
Which is not bad, but the rest basically the same as what I bought them for, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There aren't short on collectors of those too, and I think the demand for that has gone down. Whereas Lego, I think, has seen a bit more of a resurgence. Miniature cars have kind of dwindled in popularity.
Well, yeah, I suppose Lego is a bit more interactive, isn't it? you can do more than kind of slide it along on something.
True, but Lego did have a bit of a downturn, but I don't know what the reason is necessarily, but they've definitely bounced back pretty strong in the last few years.
Well, actually, funnily enough, you sent me an article with a video on it. Did you happen to watch the video?
No, I didn't.
So it was the new CEO of Lego talking about their strategies for the future, and obviously keeping their client base, or I guess maintaining their client base and keeping their sales strong and everything like that. And what they said was that kind of a lot of their marketing has been from things like the Lego Movie, their games that they've put out, and
video games,
yeah, and just kind of going into other areas and marketing through those areas to build popularity for the actual brick and mortar stuff.
They have done a lot more franchises.
Yeah, exactly. So
back in the day, Lego always had their own characters.
Well, yes.
Now they very heavily lean on existing franchises and characters.
Yeah, and perhaps that's why. But it is interesting, and I hope that your Trons turn a profit.
Did you see Google's Pi Day celebration?
I did, and I actually had a laugh at it as well, because I guess something that I just happened across the other day was an article on the usability of pi and how many digits of pi we actually need. Now, just to I guess summarize what Google have done with their Pi Day celebration, they have perhaps you could explain the tech behind it, because I vaguely understand, but I don't really know what they've done to calculate pi to such a
well, just at a high level overview, I suppose. First of all, one thing, that Pi Day is celebrated on the 14th of the 3rd or March every year. So Google, to celebrate this, tried to set a world record for calculating the most digits of pi. And basically all they did, because calculating pi is fairly straightforward calculation. But for those that may not know, the number pi is an irrational number and will just go on forever. Like the digits. There's no set value. Although many people will say pi is 3.14, that's just a very rough approximation. It's actually 1 4 blah 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 blah, on for infinity, basically. It will never come to an end. So all Google did was chuck that calculation into their immense cloud computing system and just give it a heap of power for quite a long time. And they came up with this ridiculously long value of pi, which I don't know how the heck was verified. I feel like it probably wasn't. They just trusted it. But Guinness have given them the world record.
How do you verify something like that?
I guess you could review the code probably and say it's very unlikely that this could be in error. So then you just kind of trust it.
Mm-hmm.
But the amount of digits they got were 31.4 trillion. So no one can actually reasonably look at that and go, yeah, manually verified that. So there is just a level of trust there.
That's a funny idea. Yeah. Okay, good point. And I think the reason that I laughed at this is because, I mean, obviously Google have done it probably not to try and calculate pi to a very precise number, more to kind of do their things on the tech side, and as I understand it, it was sort of a trial for their cloud computing system. Is that correct?
Probably just sort of a bit of that to check its scale, and there was probably some new technology involved.
Yeah.
But really, Google has had a lot of cloud computing available for anyone to use, really, at cost, for a long time now. So it was probably, like you say, a bit of a promotional effort.
Yeah. Now, just, I suppose, an interest piece here, and this is something I just stumbled across. I didn't know this before, but to say how many digits of pi we really need, or just to kind of give you an idea of what we would possibly do with this, is if you were to take pi to the 40th decimal place, so 3 point and then 40 numbers after that, you would be able to calculate the circumference of the entire visible universe an area with the radius of about 46 billion light years to the accuracy equal to the diameter of a single hydrogen atom.
That's pretty good.
And that's to 40 digits. So, and obviously when we use pi in a practical sense in the world, I think NASA only used 5 decimal places. I could be slightly wrong there.
That sounds about right.
And 5 decimal places for their something computing, and then when there's another type of computing they do which they use 6 decimal places for. But that's all that we really need in a practical sense. Maybe we could just be a bit generous and chuck the 7th digit in there, but I believe science calculators only come with 3 or 4 digits in them. And we all know it is 3.142, even though it's actually 3.1415 something.
Yes. So
something.
It is pretty typical in engineering applications to only use to 5 or 6 decimal places. So it kind of makes sense for NASA. Where it might possibly need to be used is like in very sort of more theoretical, very maths heavy calculations. I don't know what exactly, but maybe when you go to small calculations, sort of nanophysics or something like that, particle physics, it possibly would benefit. I'm just speculating, but usually that's where you want more digits. Whereas, like you say, in the real world where you're building physical objects that people interact with, it's usually not necessary at all.
Yes, yeah.
Which is kind of hilarious that there's been this race to ever increase the amount of digits of pi that we know.
Yes, well, I suppose it doesn't really have to be logical though, does it?
No.
It's good fun. Better fun for some, I suppose, if you're interested in mathematics and pi is something you use every day.
When was the last time you used pi, Alex?
I believe it was in year 12 when I was busy failing my mathematics exam.
Such a shame.
Probably chucked a pi or 2 in there just to try and look like I was doing something.
Oh dear.
Yes, I imagine you've probably used it for your degree at some point, and obviously you've built apps that use pi too. So
yes, if you're drawing things, circles and that on screen, you typically end up using pi.
Yes, yeah.
Also, trig has a lot of pi in it.
Well, funnily enough, I mean, I was one of those students who never really understood the point of algebra in general, and just the idea of kind of using these formulas in the real world. I just don't think I have the brain that I could quite understand how you could use them in a practical sense. And I was really impressed when one day I saw our builder using, it wasn't pi, it was Pythagoras' theorem to build our shower or something, and I was just so impressed. I was like, wow, this is amazing. He's found a real life use for it. I never thought I'd see it. I know that it's used everywhere, but
you were so skeptical.
I was. Well, I think if you don't understand something, it's hard to see how it could be used, and that is very much me with everything mathematical.
It is a bit of a problem I find in the way they teach mathematics in a lot of places. They go very heavy on the theory without showing practical examples.
Well, exactly, yeah.
Or the practical examples they do throw in there are pretty, what's the word, extraneous?
Well, I would say that they're fairly, I guess so. Extraneous, maybe, yeah. I just things that you never actually encounter or want to calculate in real life, I think, is what I always think of.
They're examples that could possibly come up, but they don't actually come up.
Exactly, yeah. If you can see how, if you were building a house and you needed to calculate this or this is how you do it. That's the practical thing, as opposed to if you were traveling along in a car at 60 kilometers an hour and then, I don't know, something else.
That's why for me, a lot of the maths in subjects like physics actually stuck a lot better than the pure maths classes.
Well, physics is just applied mathematics, right?
Well, that's the thing, but you're trying to do something and you're using maths to do it, as opposed to just doing maths.
Yes, yeah. And I agree with that, but I was also terrible in physics.
Different reasons, maybe.
Different reasons, yeah. I think maths was the common problem for me in a lot of ways. So.
Yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate though, because people either love or hate maths usually, but it's just because maths always, like, it builds on itself at every step, and as soon as you miss one step and then you start to try to go on to the other ones and you haven't fully grasped the underlying step, then you start to get lost. And then when you start to get lost, like in basically any subject, you'll start to disengage and you'll then feel like you're not good at it, and therefore you won't like it, and therefore you won't try as hard in it, and it's sort of just a bit of a cycle.
Yes, yeah, I understand. And I agree with that as well. Yeah. You have golden rice on here. Is that kind of vitamin A enriched rice or something?
Yeah. So I don't know how much you've heard about advancements on the whole golden rice thing, but like you say, this is genetically engineered rice that contains a higher level of vitamin A than your regular rice, specifically aimed at being grown in developing countries.
Absolutely.
Where food that are good sources of vitamin A are not readily available, and can cause quite severe health problems. Like, a lot of children go blind because of vitamin A deficiency, and after they're blind, then they die usually because, well, there's not any sort of support structure in place as well. So if this type of food can get into wide distribution, it could be a huge benefit to the developing nations of the world. Like anything GMO based, though, there's a huge amount of opposition from people that don't really know what they're talking about.
Yes.
So a slight advancement in this is that not too long ago, a bunch of developed nations like the US and Australia, maybe Canada or the UK, I can't remember which, maybe both, approved the use of this golden rice to be grown, right? And distributed, I think. However, in those countries, it's never going to be grown and sold because there's no need for it. But that was more just to help those developing nations sort of see that it is safe and it can be used. So recently Bangladesh, which is one of these nations that could greatly benefit from this, have, I think, begun growing it.
Okay.
Fairly small scale, but it's like starting to come online. And so more and more of this loud opposition is tried to come into place, because I think from the anti-GMO side of things, they really don't want to see this rice succeed, because then that will be a win for GMO, and they feel like it'll be a slippery slope after that. So they're saying things like, oh, well, this is not really a good solution, and because of all the other negative things they usually say about GMO, and what we really need is to fix poverty and change the diet of these people and all these other things, right? Like, that's the way we fix this problem, which, okay, maybe you agree with that. I don't know if you can really change the diet of a whole nation very easily, but fixing poverty, totally on board with that. But even if you could do all these things, that would take probably decades, and they just want to put these other things out there to try to scare people off this GMO product, which can have positive influences, probably within the year.
Yes. And just for our listeners, you all know who these people are. They're the same people who have been violently arguing against mandatory vaccinations in front of a measles outbreak that's happened, and I think a polio outbreak as well. And probably the same people who you see at your local health food store buying organic food, and just general idiocy that isn't backed by science at all.
No,
really. And like I actually, the reason I know golden rice is it's been, I think, it's been argued for quite a lot over probably the last decade or so. I don't know exactly when it came out, but it's not a new idea. But as you say, even though genetically modified, and I'm kind of putting that in quotation marks, food is proven to be safe, because really all food we eat today is genetically modified, in the sense that we have modified our food through selective breeding, and I think some of us might have seen those pictures of like an old cob of corn or something like that, and it was just a tiny little stick with a few weird little bulbs on it, and which we have managed to change into the corn that we know today. And there are obviously a lot of examples of things like that. And it's just sad to see that these kind of arguments keep on being allowed to have any traction. And obviously, a change has to come from, I guess, a government level, which fortunately Australia and Canada seem to have taken some initiative on. But it's hard to also kind of remember that people are dying while this is happening, and we are dragging our heels on it.
Exactly, and the people that are arguing against it, of course, are not in any sort of risk of dying.
Well, they're not, but they are in a lot of ways responsible for it.
Yeah, they are.
And, if you had a valid concern, then that's all well and good, but there aren't actually any valid concerns against genetically modified foods.
A lot of the things they list are things like it's copyrighted and patented, and not just the potential health angle, but also that. But the interesting thing about Golden Rice is it's sort of a collaboration between many different sort of non-for-profit agencies. And like you say, the idea is not new, but they're still actively working on it now to, try to make it as the growing as efficient as possible.
Right, okay.
But every time they make an advancement, they make it like freely available. There's no sort of patent, no charge, nothing around this. And even if they do start to use technology or, design patents from other things that have patents on them, what they do is they actually legally acquire the rights to that and then make it freely available within this one Golden Rice product. So there's none of that. Anyone can take this, anyone can use it, anyone can grow it, which is really fantastic.
It is.
But is also why the anti-GMO people are doubly scared by it, because they've lost a huge amount of their talking points around it.
Oh, really? You see, I had no idea from the patenting point of view. I had heard that GMO foods could be patented, but I didn't know the technicalities behind it. But what difference does it make, really, if a food is patented versus whether it isn't? That doesn't change anything about it.
No. Well, I guess they're just scared from a farmer's perspective, or even just a consumer perspective, that there's going to be more cost involved in production, I suppose, and therefore it'll drive up price and yada, yada, yada. And you won't necessarily, or someone will own like the idea of a particular vegetable or something, which they're not a fan of, which is a bit of an issue, I suppose, but it doesn't exist in this case.
Yeah, well, it's a sad situation generally, and hopefully it starts to get used in other countries, because I've heard that there's a lot of fear from primarily I had heard of it in relation to use in Africa, which is obviously, I think, the poorest place, generally speaking, in the world, and but it's banned by almost every government there because they won't use the GMO technology.
Yeah,
people are suffering. Yeah.
Thanks again for joining me, Alex.
Not a problem, David. Pleasure as always.
You can follow and get in touch with us on Twitter at Tangential Soup, and you can find this week's show notes for more information about today's topics at tsp.fm/206. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider sharing it with anyone you think might also, and we'll talk to you again next week. Bye.
Ciao.
There's some vacuuming started in the background, Alex.
Oh, you can hear it, can you?
Yes. I think that's our cue to wrap up.
All right, cool.